Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Jennifer Wickline, Member Services Coordinator at PMBA. I have a few housekeeping notes. You'll notice that when you signed on, you are in listen-only mode, but we do encourage participation. You should see on your screen a white panel with an area of questions and chat. As we're going along, if you have a question, please type it in the box and we'll get to the questions at the end. Also, if you'd like to receive CPE credit for today's session, please be sure to email info@pmbaonline.org to request your certificate. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carol.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I know that you have busy schedules. We appreciate you taking the time out to join us on today's webinar, FCC Repack, a Financial Perspective. I've got some folks on the line with us who are, if not experts in this field, certainly experienced in this field. They've been through it and have the battle scars to prove it. This webinar came about as a result of a conversation that we had during a PMBA board meeting. Some of the members were talking about their experience with the Repack and lessons that they've learned along the way. And our board chair, Ron Hetrick, thought this would be a great webinar. So here we are. This will be somewhat of a discussion among our panelists about their experiences, their hard-learned lessons, and what they hope you can take away from their experience. Let me introduce our panelists. Carol Ferris is the Director of Finance for Montana PBS in Bozeman. She's a Montana native and has lived in the Gallatin Valley for over 25 years. She holds a BS in Business Marketing and Master's in Accountancy, both from MSU Bozeman, and is a certified public accountant. She has over 20 years of business and accounting experience practicing in public, private, and nonprofit sectors. Leon Masseni has worked in the engineering department at KPBS for 38 years and currently serves as the Director of Engineering. Leon has also worked as a freelance engineer for several media networks, specializing in sports audio engineering. He started his career in the commercial broadcast industry at KREX Grand Junction, Colorado, then moved to KTNV and KVBC in Las Vegas before joining KPBS. Leon is a past member of the PBS Enterprise Technology Advisory Committee, also lovingly known as ETAC, where he served as chairman for 4 years. His colleague, Vince Petronzio, has over 35 years of progressive experience in accounting, finance, and operations. He started his career as a CPA at Ernst & Young and progressed to senior manager, focusing on a variety of public and privately held organizations, including publishing and nonprofit institutions. Vince has been with KPBS since 2010, and as an associate GM, oversees the finance, traffic, corporate development, and membership functions for the station. Joe Schifano is the Director of Business and Fiscal Affairs for NPR's distribution division, which manages the Public Radio Satellite System, or PRSS. In this capacity, Joe leads the team responsible for divisional finance reporting, budgeting, billing, collections, contracts, and marketing support. Joe has served NPR for more than 21 years, beginning his career as chief accountant in NPR's finance division and moving to the NPR distribution and PRSS team in 1997. I'm Carol Sorber, Director of Professional Development at PBS, where I've helped champion professional development and continuing education in the public media system since 2010. I came to PBS 9 years ago from a global law firm where I held various positions from IT training to professional development and continuing legal education for lawyers. In that role, I also co-authored a book on talent management and talent development in law firms. So let's get going. Here's our agenda for the day. We'll start with a high-level overview of the Repack process, talk about the impact of the Repack on TV stations, move to the practical experience of the panelists with the process, including Form 399, reimbursement, and lessons learned. then move to impact on radio stations and wrap up with some resources. And we'll take your questions at the end. Please remember, you can type your questions in at any time, but we'll open it up to answer your questions towards the end. Before we get started, we're going to do 2 quick polls to help us understand who's on the call with us today. Jenny, please run poll number 1 for us. So this will come up on your screen, asking you to let us know what type of broadcast license your station holds. Choose radio only, radio and TV, or TV only.
We're getting a lot of responses. Great. Yeah, we have 89%. Oh, 96% have voted.
Excellent. Thanks for participating, everyone. Appreciate it. So you can close that whenever you're ready and then display the results.
Okay. And there's the results.
Fantastic. It looks like the majority of folks on the call with us are joint licensees, followed closely. So 46% are joint licensees, 42% are TV only, and 12% are radio only. Thanks, Jenny. Now, can you run poll number 2 for us? Poll number 2 will ask you what discipline is your primary focus at your station. Choose one of these answers: finance, HR, management, technical, or other. Here
we go. We're getting a lot of participation. This is great. 100% have voted. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And there's the results, Carol.
Fantastic. So most of you are in finance. 74% of you are in finance, 11% in management, and 11% in technical. 4% are other, and there's nobody on the line from HR. Okay, great. That really helps us out so that we know we have an idea of what your concerns might be. Great, you can close that poll. Thank you, Jenny. Now I'd like to introduce Carol Ferris. You heard me read her bio earlier, so I won't repeat that. Carol is the Director of Finance for Montana PBS. Carol, take it away.
Thanks, Carol. So I'm going to kind of start with the basics a little bit and just talk about where we are with everything and just kind of do a brief overview of why we're having this conversation today. All of you, I'm assuming, or probably have been involved at some level with the Broadcast Spectrum Incentive Auction. And basically that auction closed out and public notice was made record April 13th of 2017. And basically what that did is it authorized the FCC to repack television stations and assign them all new channel numbers. Only if you went through the proper process are you eligible for reimbursement. There's been 1,000 plus stations have already been repacked during the phase period, or there'll be 1,000, repacked during this phase period. July 3rd is supposed to be the cutoff of 2020, which is supposed to be the last phase deadline. However, there is a 180-day, so a 3-month possible extension due to outside extenuating circumstances, basically meaning that if it's out of your hands, what vendors can do for you. So if you couldn't line up your antenna person or your transmitter, then you'll be able to do an extension. Approximately 140 TV stations in over 40 markets have already been completed, so their phases are done. I happen to be in one of those markets where our phase is completed. And then there were 94 stations that have been granted phase changes. Some of those actually opted to do them early, believe it or not, and get through the process on the front end, and some, of course, have extended and asked for later dates. I want to talk just a little bit about the FCC reimbursement system. If many of you have either been in there or at least in phases of that, depending on where you are with your phases. Basically, the FCC licensing and management system, which is the LMS, lots of acronyms, is the primary site that you're going to be going into for all of your reimbursement process. You need to have your FRN or FCC registration number, which you should all have by now. You need to be able to enter all of your banking information so that you can receive the funds when they do reimburse. And then that's all done through a separate website, which is the Commission Registration System, or CORS. And again, most of you were finance, so you've probably already done this or worked with your engineer to make sure all this is in place. And then the big highlight of everything, of course, is the infamous Schedule 399, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. That has to be in the system, approved, and ready to go, because everything you do will follow through that 399. So then I want to kind of discuss the phases page. So if we can go ahead and pull up that those next slides. I'm not sure, I'm not seeing, so hopefully you're on the phases screen.
Yeah, Carol, we have that phases graph showing on the screen right now.
Perfect, perfect. Mine just bugged out on me. I apologize for that. So anyway, depending on where you are with the phases, like I said, I'm already through my phase because I was one of the phase ones, but everybody would have had to have, you know, concluded basically by now having your construction permit, all of the permitting, and you're in your planning and construction phase, possibly still starting to move into testing. But obviously there's probably some of you on the call that haven't officially went through this whole reimbursement process yet. So we just kind of want to talk a little bit about that today and give you some insights and how to go about that. I think I'm going to throw it back to you, Carol, for another poll.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Carol. Kind of confusing. Maybe there's two Carols on the line.
Sorry about that. Yep.
We're going to go to poll number 3 now, but I want you to take a look at this, what's on your screen right now, which the graph showing the phases. Because the next question is going to ask you which phase of the repack is your station in. Is it going to be phase 3 or 4, phase 5 or 6, phase 7 or 8, phase 9 or 10, or you're already complete, not part of the repack, or you're just unsure? So take a look at the screen, and then Jesse, if you would please go ahead and pull up that poll number 3. Thanks. So thanks for answering the poll. When Jenny gets a good percentage of you all having completed that, she'll close it and then display the results.
We have 89%.
And I wanted to talk about. And this is Carol Ferris. I was going to talk about that a little bit after we got the results too.
Fantastic. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Give it just a couple more seconds and then we can close it. We're at 86%.
Okay.
So far, 56%. It's majority. Is unsure, already complete, or not part of it.
That's a lot. That's a big percentage. I'd be interested in during Q&A to find out from you why you're unsure, or possibly you are part of that complete too. So it'd be interesting during the Q&A to maybe discuss that a little bit. That's a big percentage.
Okay, I'll put that out there for the Q&A. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share results. And there you go.
8. So I'm just kind of going to make an assumption that a lot of that 56% I don't think are complete, because we have a lot of time left on this, basically between now of 19 and 2020 of next year. So I would think that there's still a lot of stations out there. So you may have some pretty good questions for us later in the Q&A. But it seems to me that basically the majority of the people on this call are still either in the process or working towards the process. So hopefully this will be helpful for you.
Okay, one more poll. It's the last poll, I promise you. Jenny, would you go ahead and pull up poll number 4 for us? This poll asks you, within each phase, what area are you most interested in? And you can choose all of the answers that are appropriate, that you know, all of the things that you're interested in. You aren't limited to just one answer on this poll. So enter your answers now.
We have 79%, 86. I'll leave this open for just a few.
Your answers in quick.
Few more seconds. The largest majority at this point is 84% are saying reimbursement.
Good thing we're going to talk about that.
And we're at a minute, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. Is that okay with you, Carol?
Yeah, go ahead.
Carol S. Okay. And here's the results.
Okay, so mostly reimbursement, followed 84%. 52% are saying Form 399 process. 48% the technical side of Repack. And then 32% licensing. So that's great because we're going to touch on all of those things. Thanks so much, Jenny, for doing this. You can close that now so we can go back to the slides. And I want to introduce to you a couple of guys who are going to talk more about this process. And I just want to remind you before that, don't forget to type your questions into the chat box. We'll collect them all and answer them at the end. So I'd like to introduce Vince Petronzio and Leon Massini to talk about their experience at KPBS. Vince and Leon, take it away.
Excellent. Leon's going to take it away.
First, I want to talk about some of the impact on television that you may not have thought about some of these things, and they could have an impact to your revenue stream if by chance during certain times of your timing. The first thing is your on-air signal could be impacted during the construction, even if you're not a Repack station. And this could be caused because your antenna is on the same tower as a Repack station. And if that's the case, you could be forced at times to reduce your power or even go off the air while the tower crews are working. And this is because of radiation from your antenna that could be harmful to the tower workers. So you will have to either reduce or turn off, depending on how bad the radiation is. This also could happen if you're next to a station that is going to be repacking and their tower is a little bit away, but the radiation from your tower is going right into the field where they're going to be working on the tower. So this also could cause you to reduce power or go off the air, and then depending on what time of day, that could be a financial revenue stream hit. The best thing to do is early find out in your marketplace who's getting repacked. Make friends with the other stations. Everybody's in this together, and believe me, from someone who's gone through it, you definitely want to have you on a direct phone call to most of the people that are doing the repack at all the other stations, because you will need to talk to them a couple times during this process at least. Another thing is the repack schedule that we saw a little bit earlier wasn't developed with PBS in mind. So there may be times when you're in a pledge or membership drive and you may have to go off the air because someone else is doing repack in your area and working on their tower, and you'll have to either reduce or possibly go off the air. People haven't thought about that. That actually happened to us for a couple of days at KPBS. So that would impact your revenue stream perhaps at that point in time, something people haven't thought about. Another thing is to be prepared to float project funding. So even though the FCC designed the program as a reimbursement program, it is possible to have timing delays, which result in an invoice due date coming due before you even get your reimbursement wire transfer.
And I'm going to talk a little, this is Vince, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that shortly.
So some of the reasons that could cause that is during the reimbursement process, in your reimbursement package that you create, and I suggest doing a cover letter with each invoice and everything and explaining it in detail what you do. They are being very, very particular on details of the invoice and how you explain it. So if you're off a little bit or something's in question, most of the people that are reviewing this are not broadcasters. They're accountants that have been hired just for this project, and they really don't have a clue as far as the broadcasting world. They're just literally black and white. And the other thing I have found is that if your invoice gets kicked back, you may have 2 or 3 things wrong with the invoice, but it usually gets kicked back with the first thing. You can fix it, resubmit it, and then it goes back in. The last thing is to have a plan B for your transition go live date. And this is for those of you who are going to go live in the testing phase in the window somewhere. And if you're a linked station, meaning that you can't move to your next frequency because someone else is on that frequency and they have to move to the next frequency, and they can't move because someone else has their frequency, and you're all linked, so it's this domino effect. If one of them has a problem, you may need to have a different date. What the problem is on this transition plan is you have to start notifying the viewers 30 days in advance of this date, and suddenly this date can go awry. So you have to have a plan B on how you're going to handle your transition and also your viewer notifications for a new change in date. Vince?
Thank you, Leon. So as you can tell, the Form 399 is a critical document, an online document in the FCC's what they call the Incentive Auction Relocation Reimbursement Fund System. And as Carol Ferris said earlier, that system is part of the LMS system within the FCC. The Form 399 is a living and changing document, and it shows both the project estimate, which can change, as well as the actual costs by category as the project progresses. The 399 is used to both account for the project estimate. It documents your reimbursement requests. That's where you insert your invoice support and other payment backup and summaries as needed. And logically, be aware that any increase in estimated costs, and KPBS did have those several times, that likely triggers a review by the FCC. And with what happened to KPBS in the review is we had to work closely with the FCC, their subject matter experts, on those changes that we made, and that takes time. I highly recommend that you become familiar with the FCC user guide in this area, and we've given you the link, the address to take a look at that. It's a 45-page document. Next slide is the first page of the 399. And the reason why I wanted to show this to you was really more the section on the right-hand side. I wanted you to see how the application sections are organized. And then the lower portion of the screen in the 4 areas that are not checked are part of the application sections that you use for submitting reimbursement requests and the support. And then next, given the polling questions on the next slide, here's some of the key reimbursement takeaways, and really kind of the bottom line here that I always wanted to know, and that is that the FCC will reimburse up to 100% of a station's repack cost estimate as verified by the FCC in the costing process. So it's up to 100% of that estimate that they verify. And the way this works, and as of February 11th, it changed a bit, the FCC now allocated to each station 92.5% of that verified cost estimate. So what that means to the financial people is that if the Repack project aggregate reimbursement, if those requests come in at that 92.5% level or below, then really your station is being reimbursed for all of your costs. But if that project cost, aggregate cost comes in over the 92.5%, up to that estimate, the station is going to have to wait because they'll receive additional funds at the end of the repack. And what the FCC will do at the end of the repack is they're going to disperse on a pro rata basis to those stations, based on the funds, to those stations that have unreimbursed costs. So if sufficient funds remain to cover, then stations will get 100% of those costs. That's the way that works. And I will tell you, in the KPBS case, it looks like we were fortunate that in our 92.5% estimate that we've had some savings, and so it's likely that we're going to be in the aggregate reimbursed up to the 92.5, which covers all of our costs. Next point, when and how often can stations request reimbursement? You can continue to submit your requests until you notify the FCC on the 399 that you've submitted all of your requests. And what they do is when you say, I'm done, I've submitted all of my requests, they're going to lock the system. So then you won't be able to submit anything else. So that's really critical that you are convinced that you're done on that. And then last, how quickly can you expect reimbursement? So finance people, again, to share KPBS experiences. In some cases, we were able to input invoices, sometimes legal and other, that were pretty straightforward, and we got reimbursed in a reasonable time frame. 30 days, Leon, would you say 30, 45 days? Yeah. And that was reasonable. However, in cases like what KPBS experienced, where we were working through our university and the mechanism that our university required in dealing with the general contractor, we had cost estimate changes. And what ended up happening in our account is we ended up advancing hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we were significantly delayed. We're one of those outliers where we had significant delays and had to have a number of conversations with the FCC and their finance team to try to expedite. So just be aware of that in your planning. So now that I've made your day on cash flow expectations, Leon's going to cover some of the finer points of the reimbursement process.
Thanks, Vince. Vince touched on this first thing here, which is the need to increase a category in the 399. It could and will likely trigger a review, and you could possibly lose an item that was previously approved. That happened to us because the engineering, especially in the engineering area, there's different engineers that review things. And for us, they decided one piece of equipment we didn't really need. So even though we had it previously approved, we purchased it, we had it in place and had to pay for it, they then disapproved it. So be aware of that. That is a possibility. I think we could probably, at the end of the repack, try and rebring that up and maybe get costs for that. This next one, showing all work on invoices and cents. This is in there because we have a contractor, like most people would go out to a contractor to do this. Contractors don't like to use cents sometimes. And our first invoices did not have cents shown. And the FCC kicked it back because in the 399 cost section, you have to put in the cents. And it did not match. And so they sent back the invoices and had me put 0.00 on most everything that I had to put in on the invoices. And then all of your professional services, legal, project management, they must have the date of the work on the invoice, the hourly rate for the person that was doing the work, the name of the person that's doing the work. And that's very important because they've kicked stuff back on that as well. So make sure you look at all these little things and have your most OCD accountant go over your package that you're sending in to catch all these little gotchas. The next page, if your reimbursement is less than the amount of your invoice, you must be sure and put in a cover letter and make sure your invoice has line item numbers and show exactly why you're asking for less money than what the invoice is. KPBS got hit with this because we went to a project general contractor who required a deposit and then a milestone 1, a milestone 2, and then a go on air and then completion payment phases. Well, some of those phases including labor, and the FCC does not pay on labor until the labor is completed. There were only 2 areas, if I remember right, that they allowed, and one of them was tower rigging, which we could get 50% on the tower rigging. So you have to, in your cover letter, make a very detailed explanation, very plain, on exactly what you're doing. Also, getting back to the very details, I had an area where I had put in invoice, and I'm going to call it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the invoice field of the 399, but on the invoice itself, it said invoice number INV-12345, and they kicked it back saying I needed to put the INV dash in there. That 12345 was not the complete invoice number. I've heard other people say that they would do something like that and omit the dash, and they had it kicked back. They just had a space. So when I talk about details, they are literally looking for details. And there is an area on the 399 when you're dealing with it, you have to put in all these attachments. And when you go to the attachments and you upload them, then you would think you'd be able to push a back button and go back into the 399 and continue on going with filling out your form. It has not worked. It didn't work yesterday. So you basically save your work, log out, log back in to get back to the thing. The back button that can get you, and it's a gotcha. I think implementation, the next slide, I think is yours, Vince.
No, the next slide is Carol.
Oh, it's Carol.
That's Carol.
Yeah, we're kicking it back to Carol Ferris here.
No worries. So I'm going to talk a little bit about lessons learned because I've kind of been through this process, and I'm more than happy to talk to anybody that needs any help, and I can kind of expand upon what everybody was saying because yeah, it's a little bit hard to navigate. Biggest thing I can offer is, know who your market is, who in the market your players are that might impact your project. Like Leon said, it could be another station. It could be somebody that's repacking that's in your area that may affect your timing. What is the level of their organization and knowledge base? Do they have somebody that knows what they're doing, or are they causing more problems than anything because they just don't have that education base? So it's really important to know who's around you and who may be affected or not affected by the repack. There's a limited number of specialists out there that are doing all of this. My station was lucky. We were kind of in the beginning stages. Their, dance cards weren't completely full, but there's a limited number of people. You need to plan your lead time. Vendors have bandwidth constraints, and everybody's kind of needing support and needing all of this stuff done really roughly at the same time, even though it's over, about a 3-year period. It's still a lot to be done with over 1,000 stations. So everybody's calling, contractors, their favorite person to rig their towers. Maybe it's who's going to do their transmission installer. Not all the stations have the same level of engineers on staff. Some of this may all be outsourced. It may all be contract labor. Some of it might be in-house. You have to line up your HVAC. Who's going to take care of your heating and cooling systems? It could all be the same people that everybody else is trying to get to. And so just make sure that you're really planning those lead times, getting ahead with those vendors, especially like if you haven't even really started your phase, don't wait till you do. Don't wait till that last minute because they may be already booked doing, somebody else's tower in another region. And there just aren't that many of them out there. It's not like there's a big vat pool of riggers that, of climbers that climb towers. Use a project manager if you can. The cost is reimbursable under this reimbursement program. If you have staff kind of doing that project management, guess what? That isn't reimbursable because it's basically just time and effort. Use an attorney to help with your forms and your licenses. It's all reimbursable as well, as long as you follow what Leon was saying about getting them turned in properly. but use an attorney. This is a quagmire of a lot of red tape, and you want to make sure that you have it done correctly the first time, because it'll make your life way easier. The other thing we want to talk about is, give consideration. How are you accounting for this repack on your books? Are you strictly doing an expense reimbursement, so it's kind of zeroing itself out over time? Are you carrying the capital assets? It kind of depends what type of licensee that you are. So if there's, hope in talking about that, we can sure talk about that more during the discussion item and, basically during Q&A. But just, really look at those things that could be affecting you that you may not even 100% control, but they're going to dictate how you get through this repack.
We're going to kick it back to Leon now to talk about permanent changes to consider.
All right, these are some things that hopefully people have already thought of and have dealt with, because we're into the system quite a bit. But things to remember are DTV changes may change the tower structural load, forcing FM antennas off the current tower and onto a new tower. And hopefully everybody's done a tower structural analysis by now at this phase in time. Structural changes may also mean that some towers will need to be replaced because they cannot support the new weight of a new antenna or whatever. This means that sometimes public radio stations will need a new transmitter location. This is going to be reimbursed by the FCC. Some TV licensees may have given up their TV station in the auction and then are going to do channel sharing with another station. But that means they still have to decommission their old system. So there will be people doing work and removing their equipment, and then possibly, if they own the tower, they may end up selling the tower. So if you're on someone else's tower, beware of that. And new DTV equipment may require FM stations to relocate their antennas to a different level of the current tower that they're on and make other permanent equipment changes. This is also going to be reimbursable by the FCC, and I think will be covered a little later in the seminar.
Thanks, Leon, and thanks, Vince and Carol. I'm going to introduce now Joe Schifano, who's going to talk a little bit about the impact on radio. Joe? Take your phone off mute. I'm not hearing Joe. Is Joe still on the line with us, Jenny? Can you tell?
Let me check. Yes, yeah, he's there.
I'm sorry, this is Joe Schifano. I went to unmute my phone and I hung myself up. So
It happens, don't worry about it.
So I'm going to start now. Next slide, please. Okay, so the impact on radio, we'll have up to 300 radio stations may be affected. This will not affect AM stations. There will be reimbursements for radio stations. So let me just go through some of this. When this originally was done, there was no consideration given to public radio. This was a TV repack, has no effect on radio. But what they found was, and it was alluded to earlier, that some of this work being done on towers will affect FM stations. Either you're going to have to, whether you're on the same tower or whether you're on an adjacent tower, you may be forced to go off the air or lower your power at some particular time when other people are doing the repack. NPR, on behalf of the public radio stations, went to Congress, went to the FCC, and said, "Hey, listen, we have over 300 stations that will be affected. Where's the money for us? There are going to be costs involved with doing this." We have gotten appropriated $50 million. How far that will go among all FM stations, I am not sure. But one of the things, and this was also alluded to earlier, These are going to be for actual cost. It's not you're not going to get reimbursed for lost revenue. I was off the tower for 2 days. I lost revenue. It's during my fund drive or whatever. Lost revenue doesn't count. It is actual expenses. Okay, it's not for reimbursement of your staff time. You're going to have an invoice, and you're going to have to submit that. We have the URL for you to go to FCC to do that. All right. So there's many different ways that you can be affected. Stations on shared towers may need to reduce power during rigging operations because of work done on TV equipment. You may face temporary removal of the FM antenna to accommodate construction or installation of a new DTV antenna on the tower. Electrical upgrades may be required on towers, which could affect power of the FM transmitters. Station transmission line may need to be relocated to accommodate new structural loads on the tower or changes in routing. The height of the location of the station FM antenna may need to change to accommodate changes on the tower. TV station licensees auctioning spectrum may sell the station, decommission equipment, and remove equipment from the tower, affecting radio transmissions. Some TV stations may build temporary facilities to accommodate constructions of the DTV facilities in order to meet the FCC's timeline, and may require temporary locations on the tower, affecting radio station transmissions. And last, some changes on a tower may not happen at the same time, meaning that the radio station could be affected more than once. Okay. As I said, there's going to be about a little over 300 stations may be affected. We did a survey of the different public radio stations, and what we found that there would be a little over 300. And last, NPR, in conjunction with CPB, we've gone out and we purchased some portable transmission and antenna kits, so that, if you're going to be, off the air for 2 weeks, it may not be worth it to go out, go to another tower, put up your antenna, put up your transmitter, and go through all that for a couple of weeks. We have 3 kits, 3 portable transmission kits, and 3 portable antenna kits. They're 300-watt transmitters that you can get from NPR. So it's on a first-come, first-served basis. We only have 3 available of each, but we'd be glad to work with you as far as if you know when you are going to be off the air, that we could get these to you. All right. And I'm going to return this to Carol at this time.
Thanks, Joe. So that really concludes the content portion of the webinar. And I just want to point out some resources that we have. Most of these resources point to the FCC website. Some of the things that you might be interested in is the user guide, sort of the auction website itself, which talks about the process, another page specific to reimbursement, the status of the repack and all the different allocations and procedures, a catalog for expenses for various equipment, and finally, there are some pretty good articles that are out there for this one from Radio World, which talks a lot about the impact on radio. And then for those of you who are members of PBS, the Hub provides quite a bit of information and resources on the spectrum auction and reimbursement, and you can find those on the Hub. You will have to log in to connect to those. So I know that that we're recording this webinar and that it will too become a resource for you. I think Jenny will post this recording on the PMBA website when it's available, probably towards the end of this week. And I'm going to open it up now to Q&A. So Jenny, do you have any questions for us?
I do. Candace Bright from KET has a question. KET has 16 sites, 2 that are co-located. Also, KET is a state agency of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, which is also complicated RE bid and quote. Any guidance, tips, or reimbursement on reimbursement? Sorry. Anybody?
Sure.
Can you read that one more time for us, Jenny?
Sure,
Sorry.
sure. No worries. Okay. KET has 16 sites, 2 that are co-located. Also, KET is a state agency of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, which is also complicated RE bid and quotes. Any guidance / tips on reimbursement?
Leon's going to take this one. We're going to bounce the ball over to him.
Wow. Poor thing.
This is an interesting one because I'm pretty sure with the FCC, each one of those transmitters that are part of your state network probably have a separate facility ID. And I don't know if they're all under the same FRN number or not. They may have their own separate ones. But it's all based off of the FRN number. So if they're all under one, you will have one big gigantic project and a big accounting nightmare.
Gosh.
I would almost treat them as all individuals, I would think. You definitely want to get with your lawyers, your broadcast team lawyers, on how you want to handle all the reimbursements. Some of this probably has already been figured out at the beginning page because you had to do I think it was the 1846 form, which got you where all the wire transfer for all the money and everything is going. And this, in order to do that, you had to kind of figure out exactly how it was going to flow. So some of this is probably already laid out.
Yeah, they'd have to know, I think, at this point, if they had multiple FRNs or not.
So let us know in the questions box if this answers your question or if you have a follow-up. That'd be great. Jenny, do you have any additional questions for us at this time?
Sure. I have a statement from William Hayes. He just wanted to say that his station wasn't a part of the repack. I threw out a question to kind of get people answering, because we had such a high amount on that last question, when you did the poll.
Right, the question about, if you're not a part of the repack or you're already complete or you don't know what phase you're in. Yeah, that was his answer. Great.
Yes, ma'am. Next, Julie Raskin wanted the panelists to know that her station has been able to get reimbursed for staff time. They've received $50,000 in staff engineering time. And so she said, if needed, she would lead a session on that for PMBA.
Wow, that would be fantastic. Thanks, Julie. Well, we may take you up on that.
Leave it to Julie to figure out a way.
I know, right?
I was thinking that same thing.
Good going, Julie.
Let's see. Lance Thomas says, can these websites be emailed to members? So the sites that you had during the meeting, can we get those to the people who were on the call today, on the webinar?
Yeah, you're welcome. Jenny, you've got the list of folks who attended the webinar. You're welcome to email the slide deck to them. Yeah, and all those links are in the slide deck. So sure, that's no problem at all.
Wonderful, thank you. And last, let's see, William Hayes said they should be all under the same FRN.
Oh, probably from the first question. Yeah, wow, that's a big project. Whew.
Oh yeah, the KET.
Yeah, the first question. I think I'd be tracking that baby in a big spreadsheet too, because that's going to be really difficult.
You know, my guess is that all the state agencies are probably going to run into a similar problem. They've got translators all over the state.
Right, exactly. Oof.
William Kerrigan, I may be saying the last name wrong. He wants to know, is anyone else using Widelity to manage reimbursement?
So say that name again, Widelity?
Yes, ma'am. It's Widelity.
So if you are using Widelity, type into the questions in the question box, "we are," and we'll be able to identify who those folks are and get that information back to William.
Okay. Candace wrote back and said, excuse me, I'm sorry. Yes, we're well into the process. So each invoice is times 16. Our total is 21 million. We've spent around 6 million, been reimbursed less than 2 million.
Oh my God.
Slowly but steadily, I've been hired to just do Repack reimbursement. So I've also been submitting my own payroll expenses for reimbursement.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, if she's working as a consultant, she should be able to do that. That's basically, she's contract labor. So she should be able to, yeah, definitely. Wow. That's a huge undertaking. Kudos to you. Wow.
Big job, Candace. Good luck.
William Hayes came back about Widelity. He says Widelity was the report that was used to estimate the cost of Repack.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, I was thinking it was a contractor or something. Okay.
Yeah, this is Leon.
Yeah, I didn't know what that was either.
No, William Hayes is correct. They were the ones that actually set up the original 399 catalog that you could go in and get pricing. But
that's right.
Also doing project management for some people. I've heard of it, but I don't know who they are, but they're also doing project management.
All right. Doesn't look like we have any more.
Okay, well, we'll keep the questions coming. If you get any additional questions, Jenny, just interrupt me. I'm going to move on to a couple of reminders.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so just as a reminder, there will be an evaluation that comes to you after the webinar ends. Please complete the evaluation. It's really important to us, those of us who are putting on these webinars, to know what you think of the content we're presenting, what you think of those speakers and how they managed or understood the content they were delivering. So we want to hear your feedback, and we read every word that you write, and we use it to make the next one better. So please, please complete that evaluation. If you require CPE credit, that evaluation is required. So thank you for that. And Jenny will send out a CPE certificate within a couple of weeks. You're welcome to direct any additional questions relating to this webinar or around CPE credit to info@pmbaonline.org. So here are contacts for those of us who were on the webinar today. I was simply a facilitator. I know very little about this, although I've learned quite a lot today. Thank you guys. But if you wanted to reach out to
Carol.
Yeah.
Carol, excuse me, I'm sorry. I did have one emailed question to me from Gary Rex. Not so much a question, sort of a comment and question. So here we go. Where we had so many people interested in the technical and Form 399 from one of the poll questions, is there a possibility, and is it worth asking a poll question during the Q&A portion as to whether people would want to have an additional webinar or water cooler conversation to dive deeper into the technical and Form 399 aspect of the Repack.
That's a great idea, Gary. Thank you for suggesting that. I think we could probably do, if not a webinar, certainly a water cooler conversation on the Form 399. Panelists, what do you think?
I think it's probably a great idea.
I think it's an intriguing idea. And, you know, through this webinar, you know, for example, Julie Raskin and what she was able to do in getting reimbursement from staff, you can see that, you know, again, we were in phase 2 at KPBS, and but you can see how others have been able to do some things and push the envelope further. And it's ultimately to the benefit of the stations to get as much reimbursement as possible. So I think it's a great idea.
Maybe we could do like a hot topics or something, and Julie could lend on that, and yeah, that could be really interesting.
Okay, I'll work on finding a date on the calendar when we can do that. So stay tuned for more on that, everyone. Thanks, Gary. That was a great suggestion. Gary Rex was part of putting this webinar together. You can see his contact information is here on the screen. Gary's kind of has a little bit of a different situation up there, and he thought that you might benefit more from the other panelists. So he didn't present today, but he's certainly very knowledgeable on this issue as well. So here's everybody's contact information. You're welcome to reach out to any of us individually if you have questions.
Carol, I have one more question for those online now, and that is, when we do the water cooler, I am most interested, and I'm speaking to the finance people here, I am most interested in comparing notes on how they are planning to treat the financial accounting. I will tell you locally that our outside auditors really didn't know how to treat it, and there's different schools of thought. We were looking to commercial broadcasters. We were doing some research. So I'd be most interested in the water cooler having that conversation as well and comparing notes.
That sounds great. I'll work on putting that together, Ben. So we're coming really close to the top of the hour. I just wanted to point out one more thing and say a couple of thank yous. First, my sincere thanks to everyone who joined us today on the webinar. We appreciate you taking the time away from your busy day to tune in. Thanks to our panelists, Carol, Leon, Vince, Joe, who provided their experience and expertise on this topic and the time that they spent preparing for this webinar. Thanks to our friend Jenny at MPS, who helped us put the webinar together and manage the technical piece of the webinar today. We won't have a webinar in May. We may have a water cooler conversation based on what we've just been talking about. I'm not sure. But in May, we'll be preparing for and attending our conference in Orlando, May 14 through 17. So if we don't see you in Orlando, and I hope we do, we'll definitely see you again in June. The topic of a water cooler conversation is still being worked on. It looks like it may have something to do with some HR issues, but we'll let you know more as soon as that's been nailed down. Please don't forget to complete the survey for this webinar. And thanks again for attending. Jenny, are there any other questions that we haven't answered?
No, but I did want to put in a word about getting your actual CPE certificate. Remember that you can email us at info@pmbaonline.org, and you just want to make sure that you fill out the survey at the end if you want your CPE certificate, and those will be sent to your emails on file at 5 o'clock. And just thank you for everybody.
Thanks, Jenny.
Oh, and sure, William Kerrigan did say, how did KPBS account for the transaction?
William, this is Vince. I will tell you that based on, so our fiscal year end is coming up and the project is substantially complete. And in consultation with our outside auditors, we intend to account for the new asset on our books. And as far as the reimbursement goes, we will recognize the revenue, if you will, the receipts from the reimbursement to the extent of the depreciation of the asset. We're not intending to recognize any gain. So we're matching revenues and expenses. So that's, I mean, in a very top level, 30,000 foot, that's what we, at this point, intend to do.
Okay, well, we are right at the top of the hour. As broadcasters, we know how to hit our mark. So thanks so much again to everybody. And Jenny will make this recording available on the website soon and send an email with this PowerPoint deck to anybody who wants it. So thanks so much.
Good night, everyone.